Welcome back to 20-Side Adventures. This is Cleric 401. If you haven't seen the other Cleric videos, highly recommend checking that out. If you're very familiar with the Cleric, then just stick around and let's see what archetypes I feel synergize really well with the Cleric. This is again assuming a free archetype style play. Some of these archetypes I might suggest even in a normal campaign, but generally speaking, I very much prefer the base classes themselves and don't find dipping into archetypes that valuable, but I love free archetype for its ability to create just this wide array of very unique characters. If you can think it up, you can play it rules as written in Pathfinder 99% of the time. As always, if you like what we do here on the channel, please leave a like and subscribe. Easiest way to support the channel, leave a comment. I love chatting with you guys. Last but not least, head on over to my Substack if you're interested in reading about the adventures at my table, where I'm doing novella-style write-ups for all of the adventures through the Shattered Lands, a kingdom builder campaign I'm running. All right, guys, let's get into Cleric 401. All right, so one thing that just hit me right out the gate with trying to pick archetypes for the Cleric is there's so many options. In a lot of classes, you have some very distinct ideas of how you're making your build, but with the Cleric, because really with the three subclasses or the class archetype, you have three real distinct roles you're filling, and therefore each of those have branches of archetypes, if you're playing in free archetype, that are super valuable. So I'm going to kind of go over some high level ones and some concepts to think about, along with some things that just kind of struck me as amusing in that space, and then you guys can kind of take it from there. So I'm not going to go through all of these in depth, but some of the basic ones that I want you guys thinking about for the Harbinger and the War Priest especially. Are you trying to be more melee focused? And if so, what weapons are you using? So taking the Archer if you're doing some sort of archery build Cleric. Taking the Bastion if you're doing the War Priest and you want a little bit more defense. On the Cloistered Cleric, Blessed One gives you some more options for healing and getting lay on hands. If you're doing anything with two weapon fighting, Dual Weapon Warrior lets you lean into those fighter feats you may not otherwise have access to. There's the Duelist if you're being kind of a swashbuckling kind of War Priest where you're using agile weapons, or maybe even the Harbinger leans into this. The other thing to consider is what weapon does your deity focus on? If your deity's primary weapon, for example, is some big two-handed beefy hammer or axe, the Mauler might be a good choice. Whatever your deific weapon is, you can weave in an archetype that works for that. Alternatively, when you're just looking for archetypes, what are things that lean into the theme of your deity? So these are kind of the things to think about when you're choosing an archetype. However, for just pure utility, if you're wanting to be a healer, the Medic could be one of the best archetypes in the game and super great for the Cleric. So this is going to be the first one I'm going to actually kind of dive into. So you have to have battle medicine, you have to be trained in medicine, which if you're going to be using traditional healing to offset your magical healing, so you're not burning up spell slots all the time, you are going to want both of these things. And if you're leaning into a Cleric that does this, I would recommend finding a background that gives you battle medicine when you're making the character, because that should be super easy to come by. But if you don't know, battle medicine lets you treat wounds in combat, basically squirt the super glue in, wrap the bandage up, and give amount of healing to keep them in the fight. And what the dedication gives you is a circumstance bonus to the healing you do when you do a battle medicine or a treat wounds. Then at 4, you get arguably the best feat in this class, where you get an action compression, where you can take a move action and then perform a battle medicine or a treat conditions as well. You can do it for yourself. So if you need to exit a situation and then patch yourself up, you get to do that with a single action. And then you can also do administer first aid or treat condition with the 2-action version and still get a move. At 4, you could also take a treat condition, which this is a skill. Keep in mind that. So this isn't taking one of your feat slots, this is taking a skill slot. And this lets you reduce various conditions on allies. So this lets you pull off debuffs of either clumsy, enfeebled, or sickened, and as you level this up, you'll get more conditions that you can just reduce, which if your party's getting debuffed a lot, this could be a really good way to get out of those negative penalties. Holistic Care is adding Frightened, Stupefied, and Stunned, so being able to go up and pull the stunned condition off of your allies could be battle altering for that encounter. Preventative Treatment, which if you know the fights you're going into, this could be super valuable. You make a counteract check in secret before the battle starts for the next minute. If the person you treated falls victim to that condition, your counteract check goes into play and maybe reduces that overall condition. So if you're fighting some basilisks that stun, You could load this in and you'll be solving the stun condition before it even happens. And then Resuscitate is a way to bring a dead character back to life. So it is literally the old red versus blue skit of, did you give them CPR for a headshot wound? Well, yes, you did, and it worked.
Why in hell would you give somebody CPR for a bullet wound in the head? That doesn't make a lick of sense.
You're welcome, sir.
I mean, it's all so damn inconsistent. What would you do if they stabbed me in the toe, rub my neck with aloe vera?
So a really solid archetype that you really can just dip into to get what you need and then move on to other things. This is true across any class that you're going to be leaning into medicine with, but it can be especially good with the cleric. I think Spirit Warrior is also a pretty solid take if you're doing a War Priest or the Battle Harbinger, because it's going to give you this great thing out of the dedication, the overwhelming combination. It gives you 1 action for 2 attacks. The second attack does take your multiple attack penalty, and it does have to be a fist attack. So you do have to keep the other hand free, which if you're doing healing medicine and you need that hand free to be able to get to your healer's kit, that could be, something that's happening pretty often. And this again is just an action compression. So you're still getting 2 attacks. You have 2 actions for your spell casting or doing whatever else it is that you have going on. You can then take these oaths, which maybe have something to do with your deity. So you can lean into which of these makes sense for your deity, fighting great monsters with the kaiju, protecting the wilds with the Sacred Wilds Oath, or ferreting out shape changers and mischievousness from Trickster's Bane. So Cutting Heaven, Crushing Earth, this is a follow-up for your Overwhelming Combination, making it a little more effective. What it primarily does is if you hit with the first attack, they will be off guard to the next attack, and it goes either way. So if you start with the fist, they're off guard to the weapon. If you start with the weapon, they're off guard to the fist. But most importantly, if you're using Hand Wraps and Mighty Blows, the runes in your Hand Wraps now also apply to your weapon, essentially doubling the amount of runes in your weapon. Flowing Palm Deflection lets you parry with your hand, essentially raising shield and getting the same benefit of +2 instead of the usual +1 for doing a parry. So this could be a real awesome option for a War Priest in the front line that maybe is foregoing the shield or the Battle Harbinger. Spirit of the Blade is just adding an extra 1d6 spirit damage at level 6. And then Spirit Light Wave is a cool kind of thematic. You put energy into your weapon and you strike far away, or you like the Master Sword range strike from Legend of Zelda. Has a lot of thematics with a Divine Warrior like the War Priest or the Harbinger might have. God's Palm at 8 lets you deal all of your damage as spirit damage, so this can help you overcome a lot of resistances on the right creature, or it's going to give you an option to heal some temporary hit points. Again, that frontline War Priest or Harbinger, this sounds very thematic for what you're going to be doing. Sheltering Pulse lets you shove your weapon in the ground and create a 15-foot bubble that for 3 rounds is going to give you a +1 status bonus to AC to all your allies in the area. So again, that War Priest, if you're going more of the buffing route, this really kind of leans into that. Transcendent Deflection is a great last-ditch effort to avoid some heavy damage. It is a reaction, and it can be for you or an ally. You get your weapon in the way, and the weapon gains the broken condition. So it's pretty rough on your weapon, but if you just need a reaction that shuts down a massive critical attack that's incoming, this is a fantastic take. Intercepting Hand gives your unarmed fist the disarm trait, and then this awesome reaction that as long as you have taken an action to be in the parry position with that hand, which maybe you've taken that other feat now, so you're +2 defense when you're doing this, you now also get a reaction to simply disarm the enemy before they hit you, and you gain a +2 status bonus to that attempt. And if it's successful, you disrupt the triggering attack. And then this also has a condition, if it's critically successful, you then get to just steal their weapon rather than letting it hit the ground so they don't have it any longer. That is a great way to just shut down an enemy in the fight altogether. And it only takes a success to stop the attack altogether, and then they are also still suffering from the disarm debuff. Then lastly, Sword of Sealing. If you hit the enemy, they have to make a fortitude save or they become immobilized. Kind of cool, but by far not, for again, the kind of capstone level 12, I don't think it is the coolest option in here. I think it's also worth noticing you do need an agile or a finesse weapon for lots of these single-handed weapons. So this is going to be really dependent on the deific weapon of your deity, and will that work? I also wanted to bring back up Cathartic Mage. I went over this in depth in my Sorcerer, and I'm not going to go through all of them, but I feel there are some great healer options in here, like the Dedication Emotion, and you could have a lot of fun with this. This also brings up as a archetype that grants spell slots. The Harbinger could really benefit from a class that grants you spell casting, so they are a great candidate for multi-classing into maybe like Sorcerer with a Divine Bloodline, which is why you're this Harbinger and you're getting extra spells, because the Harbinger does lose a lot of its spell casting, so you can minimize some of those penalties by maybe leaning into that with archetypes that grant you more spell slots. Undead Master is for our evil clerics out there that are leaning into using harm and maybe all of those feats that let you raise the dead. This just kind of lets you lean into that even more effectively. Undead Master Dedication essentially gives you an animal companion with the undead trait. So again, this one's going to have to play right with the right party, make sure everyone involved kind of knows what's up, and that evil and undeadness are going to be part of the repertoire, so to speak. You can also gain additional companions, so you can have multiple undead minions following you around. If you are leaning into kind of that necromancer vibe of a cleric, or you're following a deity that is of the undead, this could be a really thematic and cool way to do that. Essentially letting you be the undead beastmaster. Guardian's Ghost takes some of the damage you're taking as a reaction and shunts it into your undead companion of 2 plus your level, and you can choose which of your undead companions this goes to if you happen to have multiple with you. Thyr's Master's Calls. In a pinch, you can pull one of your inactive companions from their rest to provide a companion support benefit. A fragment of your companion materializes or assembles itself in an unoccupied square of your choice within 30 feet and grants you the support benefit, and then disappears on your next turn. If it takes any damage before your next turn, it disappears or collapses, and the support benefit ends immediately. So again, this is leaning into which support benefits can you get from your animal companions that are going to help you out as a cleric. Undead Slayers for the opposite side of that, and this is if you want to be going around and killing the undead, if you are Pharasma's cleric, or like Drustanis in my world. Undead Slayer Dedication gives you Slayer's identification. When you roll initiative, you can take a recall knowledge against undead creatures, so that can be really handy right out the gate. Oh, another thing that this reminds me of, prerequisite trained in religion. If you're looking for archetypes that might work, look for ones that specifically call out being trained in religion, because they're going to have themes that just lean into your kind of cleric aspect. Blessed Undead lets you be better at treating diseases. So if someone has ghoul fever, for example, and you're in a setting where that's super important, this could be a great take. Hunter's Sanctum lets you make a safe house, which is pretty cool for just story and build reasons. It could be a little shrine to your deity that also helps you hide from the undead. Necromantic Resistance is you're going to get a bonus to void damage and necromancy effects, or probably death effects with Remaster. Slayer Strike is a 2 action, and this is basically just Vicious Swing for fighting the undead. It counts as 2 attacks for multiple attack penalties, but you gain an extra die of weapon damage. So this can work really well again for the Battle Priest or the Harbinger. Frighten the Undead allows you to use your religion roll instead of your intimidation roll to frighten undead, even mindless undead. So for any cleric, you're high in wisdom, you're trained in religion, probably to the max. So a great way to let you debuff the enemy using your skill actions that maybe wouldn't be as great because you're not leaning into charisma. Gear Up gives you Precinct Planner and Precinct Consumable feats for free, which are both interesting takes, especially if you need various things on the fly. Getting 2 feats for the price of 1 is never a bad take. Slayer's Blessing augments your Slayer's Strike, which either gives you the Ghost Touch property, or you can add Cold Iron, Darkwood, or Silver. And at 14th level, this increases to Adamantine and Mithril. So this just lets you lean into having the right tool at the right time. Much like the Cleric's healing fonts that don't force you into slotting spells you may not need and have flexibility, this just kind of leans into that on the martial side of things. And then Slayer's Presence brings all of this class together, where you take your free recall knowledge, and if it's successful, you can make an intimidation check using your religion set that you get to take from the other feat. So I always appreciate classes that just bring all of these things together, and I think that's pretty cool. And now we're moving into the more thematic ideas that I had for a cleric. So for example, the celebrity. Now you're thinking, why on earth the celebrity? Well, because you are that celebrity preacher. Yes, you are the televangelist of your day.
Blessed him with silver and gold. How many of you like silver and gold? Those of you that don't, you're in the wrong church.
Everyone knows about you and your preaching and your bringing of followers to your faith. You'll notice the celebrity doesn't have any prerequisites, so you can really use it on any class that this makes a lot of sense for. Right out the gate, you get a +1 circumstance bonus to earn income. So when you're passing that collection plate for the faith, you will be that much better at it. And then you get the upstage reaction, which essentially lets you mimic someone that just attempted some sort of skill check. And if you succeed, assuming they failed, you get a +1 bonus to attack rolls, perception checks, saving throws, and skill checks. And if you critically succeeded, it doesn't matter what they rolled, you just do it that much better. Never Tire lets you shrug off the fatigued condition. Could be useful for anyone in an adventure where you're moving quite a bit. You're an embarrassment as another reaction, so this is going to be a real reaction-heavy archetype. If you didn't take many reaction options from the Cleric, this could be an awesome take for you. And this is an ally within 30 feet fails a will save against specifically an incapacitation effect, so I don't know how frequently this is going to happen, but the ally gets to reroll with a +1 circumstance bonus, so incapacitations are usually pretty bad, so if someone critically failed it, it had to be not great. So this just gives you an option to get around some of the most devastating potential debuffs. Feeling your oats maybe doesn't fit quite as great for the Cleric because you're pretty good at will saves, but essentially you get to make a deception check and substitute that result for a will save. That's going to happen within the next minute. Mesmerizing Gaze is going to give you an option to fascinate a target, which fascinate again in combat is really difficult to utilize. It's highly dependent on your position in the turn order, and I feel is best used against an enemy caster. So if you have an enemy caster coming right after you and perhaps you delay your action to get the most use out of this, you put yourself just before them. Boom, Mesmerizing Gaze. They're fascinated by your sermon or whatever it is you've done, and now they can't cast their spells on the next turn because they are fascinated and they cannot use things with the concentration trait like most of their spell casting. Grudging Compliment could be a really fun one. You take some damage, and as a reaction, you attempt a diplomacy against their will save, and you make them off guard for your suddenly like, oh, that was a really good hit, and they're just really confused by it. Statement Strut, while this is supposed to be fashion, it could instead be reflavored to be all of the regalia and accoutrement, your faith, your church, the fine vestments, and everyone just stands in awe as you move through. It is a performance versus will DC, and it takes away enemies' reactions. So it could be a really great way for you to help out your team. Big debut is just before you roll initiative. You strike a dramatic pose, deliver a snappy quip, or reveal a shocking new costume, where for the Cleric, this could be a sudden sermon or a battle cry for your deity or a quick prayer that comes out and just shakes up what's going on. As a result, you don't roll initiative and you voluntarily go last. Everyone who can see you must attempt a will save against your class or spell DC, which should be pretty high as a Cleric. On a failure, the enemy is overcome with the anticipation or taken by the words of your sermon, and they become stunned 1 or stunned 2 on a critical failure. So here's the thing with that. They don't get any reactions for this entire first round, which some of them may not if you get to go first, but if they're first, you've just stripped their reactions away, and you've reduced their actions on that first round of combat, which is really going to set the tone that they are behind now for the rest of this combat. And then as your first action, you can stow away your holy item or whatever you were kind of using for this to get a +1 to all your charisma-based checks. I don't feel that's super valuable necessarily for the Cleric in this setup, but just that possibility of stunning people out the gate just because of your liturgical speech or the prayer or whatever this holy item that you were maybe debuting to them all, I just think really has a lot of cool thematics for a Cleric. Command Attention, again, this could be revolving around your deity's power or your faith's authority rather than the style that this generally leans into. And what this does is whenever a creature within a 30-foot emanation attempts a saving throw against a different visual effect rather than what you're doing because they're so focused on you that it's 1 degree of success better. So this is really helping out your allies, but it could help out enemies too, so be aware of that. This is a fortune effect. Now, when an enemy specifically with your aura attempts to use a visual effect that involves focusing its attention on a particular creature, it must succeed a will save against your class DC or your spell DC in order to target any other creature except you. So it's hard for them to make a visual effect against someone else because they can't take their eyes off of you. So this could be a good way to kind of keep your allies safe as well. Acknowledge a Fan. This is kind of an interesting one as you're just so well known for your preaching and your sermons. In this case of kind of reflavoring the celebrity, you choose one target who can see you and you acknowledge their existence. The target must attempt a will save against your class or spell DC. So again, as a Cleric, this is going to be really good. And as a result, if they critically succeed, they're immune. If they succeed, it's stunned 1. So in most cases, you are at least getting a stun. Now, this does have incapacitation, so keep that in mind. If they fail, it's stun 2, and if they critically fail, which incapacitation again, so pretty unlikely to get a crit fail, but it has the potential to paralyze the enemy just from acknowledging them. Pretty solid take. Prima Donna, again, you can kind of change this one just to being the well-known preacher. You make a perform check against an enemy's will DCs on a success. They get a +1 bonus to hit you because they're so focused, but they are now off guard to everyone else. And if you get a critical success, this is for 3 rounds. So this could be a good way just to help your team out all around. Costume change lets you swap your armor pretty quickly, as well as quickly invest a new item. So if you have a lot of magical items you're switching around, this could be pretty useful. It's Not Over is pretty interesting, as the finale of any performance doesn't have to be the end. And for you, this now extends life itself. When damage would reduce you to 0, you can use this reaction, and instead of gaining the dying and the unconscious condition, you regain hit points equal to 10 plus your level plus your con modifier, which you've probably put some con in, especially if you're going War Priest. And this just straight lets you stay in the fight, keep yourself up, live to heal yourself to the next round, and is just a great way to make sure you are a cleric that is not going away in the fight. Tragic Lament is a reaction when you have been critically hit, going to lament of your demise to your enemy, and they will feel bad for you, or maybe in this case you give them another sermon of the wickedness of their ways and how they are striking you, a servant of your god, and they kind of have this reconsideration. So now you're taking normal damage instead of the crit, and they must make a will save against your class DC. Again, as a cleric, this is going to be really good, and otherwise they will be slowed 1 for 1 round. So you're going to be stripping actions away, removing yourself from a crit, and just a solid way to keep yourself in the fight. And lastly, at 20, you can gain Fabricated Truth as an occult innate spell. And I mean, which preacher wouldn't want to be able to instill such supernatural devotion in their sermons? Perhaps the more cynical take on that, but again, something really interesting. So if you want to be that very prominent preacher type character, I think celebrity is an interesting way to do that as a cleric. All right, so now a couple that are deity specific, and I'm not going to go through all of these, I think, because I've hit them in some other videos before. But like, for example, if you follow Thizamet, which is from Pathfinder 1st edition here, which is an Empyrean Lord of the Feast, or if you're on Eraneth, Farius, the Master of the Feast and God of Gluttony, you might be interested in taking the Wandering Chef, so you can produce food so wonderful to appease your deity and bring his or her love of all things that are delicious to the masses. Wandering Chef gives you some advanced alchemy for just food items, which are pretty cool, and then some just great ways to buff and some thematic fun things that you can take that all revolve around cooking and eating. There's also the Ooze Morph. This is a dedication where you have been consumed partially by an ooze and you take on ooze-like tendencies, which could be great if you are someone who's in a pact or following Jubilex, a demon lord, or Iocane the Mired from Eraneth, which is an alchemist that has pushed too far and accidentally turned himself, or maybe intentionally turned himself, into this horrific oozy abomination thing. And now you are following in his footsteps, and you have become an ooze-like creature, which is going to give you a +2 circumstance bonus to reflex saves from being engulfed by creatures, and you become trained in occultism and ooze lore. And you also get that +2 bonus to escape checks when you've been engulfed. You do increasingly become off-putting to those around you as you become more ooze-like. You take penalties equal to the amount of feats you've taken from this dedication to interact with animals and humanoids with your diplomacy checks, up to a total of -4. These are all super bizarre, and they're probably like not necessarily great choices, but if you are someone that's following this kind of oozy, demonic, evil deity, or you perhaps fell into them with some effect, here is an archetype that specifically leans into oozes. Why wouldn't you, story-wise, think about taking that to become even closer to your deity? And then the last one on this that I thought was pretty interesting was a Prophet of Calistrade. These lean into doing merchant type stuff. So Abadar, the first deity I could find from Pathfinder that actually leaned into these goofy archetypes I was taking. This guy's all about trade. Or in mine, Rulon, Lord of Avarice, who is a banker. Yes, it is a god of banking. And the Prophet of Calistrade is a perfect archetype for just such a cleric. Again, these aren't necessarily the best choices to make the best, most effective cleric. These were kind of fun things to lean into what your deity could potentially be. So keep an eye out for what your deity's domains are and their themes and what they're all about, and see if there's some archetypes that lean into that and would be interesting and fun to play and build. All in all, for effectiveness, if you're going healer, I think medic is a must take, and then you have plenty of room to dip elsewhere. If you're going war priest or harbinger, any of the battle types is going to help you and let you lean into your deific weapon style a little bit. And then there's plenty of fun and interesting things you can do with a cleric and archetypes to build a cleric that is dialed into the various amount of deities that are out there. And there are so many deities you can be a cleric of, and how you can make them unique with the 150 some odd archetypes we have. I would love to hear what your most interesting cleric builds have been in this regard. Have you ever built one really leaning into a deity that perhaps wasn't the most, optimized at the table, but just really was all about your deity? I'd love to hear about that in the comments below. As always, if you like what we're doing here, please leave a like and subscribe. Easiest way to support the channel, leave that comment. Let me know your favorite archetype for a cleric, and I'm going to wish you a fantastic time on your 20-side adventures. We'll catch you next time.